for some questions.
Number of staff you can outsource to India, and is this purely a political thing, the 60% limit, or could it go higher if you felt that it was economically viable?
Can you hear me now? Okay. The answer to the question is that yes, it could go higher, but the constraint that's placed on the business is that it can't shed jobs in the UK at the expense of gaining jobs in India. So we just think we have to manage dynamically, but politics will be an important factor in the UK we need to manage.
Okay, right. Any other questions?
Hello. Okay, I am Vijay Srinivasan from Irevna. You talked about the other services which could be outsourced, procurement, etc. Now suppose you go for another provider, say not Zanza, will the decision-making time be as large, say 1.5 to 2 years? And if you go with Zanza, will the decision-making time reduce since you already have an existing relationship in place?
What he's saying is that you have a relationship with Zanza. Now, if you had to do something else with Zanza, does that mean the decision for that would be easier? And if you wanted to deal with another service provider, would that decision time be longer or shorter?
Okay, I understand. As ever, the answer to that question is it depends. It depends on what you want to do and how big the thing is you want to do. If you want to make you might say a minor change to the range of services, the value of the services or whatever, then that's a thing you just negotiate immediately through the company and do. But if you have an enormous new product or a new service you want to deliver through outsourcing, then we're obliged under government rules to tender those services, and then you are into another 2-year cycle.
I think there was a question from there, that lady.
Hi, I'm Smita. I have this question. Currently, Zanza has a lot of operations only in India. I mean, large offshore operations. With everybody going on the global delivery model, does SBS want to take that route as well? And then would Zanza be the ideal partner?
It's quite difficult for me to answer on behalf of Zanza, I'm afraid. I'm not an employee of Zanza and I can't speak for them.
Simon Corkin, The Observer. I was struck by the at least implicit criticism of the current model of outsourcing that's practiced in the public sector in the UK, which is quite a lot. So do you see what you're doing in the NHS with the JV as something that could spread to other areas of the public sector?
The comment I made about outsourcing models actually was derived from comments made by private sector people in the earlier sessions this morning. They all made the point that it's impossible to write the perfect output specification. And it's quite encouraging to me to understand that, because in the public sector we find it very difficult too, and I thought it was a unique problem that we had. And so it's a generic statement around the time lag between idea and implementation you have with a fixed contract. To answer your second question, yes, I firmly believe this model will be used elsewhere in government to deliver other kinds of services. But again, it's the right circumstances in the right place.
Okay. Next question. Okay. Yeah, no, please go ahead. And after that, this lady here who's been waiting.
Yes, hello, Stefan Kuppen here, JP Morgan. Could you briefly describe the scope of services that the shared business services JV covers at the moment, and do you see scope for this to, let's say, permeate far further into the NHS in the future?
I can describe them as a traditional finance and accounting function that goes all the way from ordering through to payment. It also covers payroll, and we are looking to how we can include full HR functionality in that service offering as well. I think there's every possibility of looking at other things, other information data sets we have in the NHS to see whether they can be outsourced too.
Okay. Yeah. Could you give the phone to that lady there? I think if you can just right next to that camera, I think. You know. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. Rachel Stormont, Nelson Hall. I have two questions which are slightly related for you, Peter. You've mentioned more than once that you see JVs as a better opportunity for local governments than a straight outsource. Can you share with us some lessons that you would, key lessons you've learned? Firstly, for an example, another major JV that never got off the floor in the local government in the UK. And secondly, one thing that ZANS's had to deal with in the last year has been consolidation of the trusts in the NHS and bringing in their commercial skills there. That type of situation could recur, a similar situation in another JV situation. So the successful key lessons you've learned that you would convey to.
Okay. There is another successful JV operating in government in the NHS already. That's called LIFT, which delivers primary care, healthcare facilities to a wide variety of locations. And there are 42 separate JVs that exist currently between the NHS and the private sector. They're slightly different. They are 60-40 in favour of the private sector, but they have delivered assets to the value of over £1 billion in the last 3 years. The lessons I've learned from this is really you're creating a new market, and you have to deal with the market accordingly. And the first step is as a high level of megaphone diplomacy, where you shout a lot and shout over the hills the way you want to do, and because you know you're going to end up somewhere in the middle. And give people the freedom and ability to deliver. In other words, what you don't tell, you tell them, here's a mechanism that will help you deliver, but you don't then micromanage them and tell them to get on with it. But that then follows a second problem, that once they've done that initial step of taking the control of their environment, is then trying to educate and train the public sector to deal properly with the private sector. We are, as collectively, not good at having commercial relationships with the private sector. And my next challenge in the JV world of LIFT is to start talking to the NHS about how it has a better commercial relationship with the private sector and holds its feet to the fire properly when necessary, and talk to the private sector what it needs to do about market consolidation and changing the way they operate with the private sector. I think your second point was about what happens with all the reorganisation and change, and I think my response to that is, well, that's why I've done a JV. If it would have been a contract and there'd been all the balls thrown in the air again, there'd have been a lot of head scratching and millions spent on lawyers, and none of us would be any the wiser. And what you can say is for certain that there'll be more reorganisations in the NHS.
Right. Okay. Do we have a mic then? Yeah, maybe just a couple more questions.
Peter, this is Anuj from TCS. What is the revenue stream for this JV? Isn't healthcare totally subsidized in UK? So how do you define profitability in such a case?
In SBS? Or
Yeah.
In SBS, yes.
same as any, it's a private business. It's registered at Companies House, and it makes a profit the same way as any other business does.
Is this subsidized by the government, or is this no?
There's initial equity going in to start the business, but that ends in 2006-7, and the business has to become self-sustaining in 7-8.
Right. Anybody else? One last question. Right. Okay, well, thank you very much for being here today, and a special thanks. Let's give a big hand to Peter.